This is the Lakin Chronicles Road to Recovery podcast with addiction specialist Dr. Greg Lakin. Real people, real stories, real addiction, and real recovery journeys. The road to recovery starts now.
Okay, I think at this point we'll send it right over to Dr. Lakin. Doctor?
Thank you, Phil. Hey, I am honored today on our show. We have a gentleman by the name of JARROD. JARROD. People know him because he's on several different radio stations. Everybody knows your voice, of course. And then, of course, you used to be on radio or on TV on KFDI. So it's really a pleasure to have you. I really appreciate you coming.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you asking.
You know, and I mean, you're very successful, but a lot of people don't know that you have a personal battle or history with battling opioids, and I really would like you to share that with us. So
well, first off, I started out with a shoulder injury. I'd been a bowler all of my life. From the time I was 10 years old, I picked up a bowling ball. And loved bowling and was pretty good at it. But the downfall was it pretty much tore up my shoulder by the time I was in my mid-30s. And so I started seeking some pain relief when, you know, I would say I was 35, I'm 45 now, and in my mid-30s, I really started having some bulge disc problems, and you know, I can't remember the names of everything that was going on, but
pain pills were given out pretty freely 10 years ago.
Yeah, all you had to do was go to the doctor and ask. And, you know, we even discussed surgery, and surgery was ruled out. It wasn't bad enough, but ultimately, to tide me over to get things better was, you know, opiate, you know, Lortab, hydrocodone, whatever, you know, it's all, whatever.
And that was back in the day when providers were told, hey, we weren't treating pain adequately. We needed to up our game, so to speak, you know, so people didn't have any pain, basically, is what the message was.
So, to fast forward a little bit, you know, before I know it, you know, years are going by, and I'm taking more and more and more and more opiate. And, you know, in my mind, I think I knew there was a problem. I knew that this couldn't continue, but you don't tell yourself that, you know, you tell yourself that if you're hurting, you don't want to be hurting anymore. And so, and I even talked with my family doctor about this, you know, but like you said, it's, you know, there was never any concerns with addiction or whatever, there wasn't. Right. And even if I knew it in my mind that, you know, if I tried to stop and couldn't, either because of withdrawal setting on or hurting, one or the other, you always fall back to taking more.
People don't realize how fast that tolerance builds up, especially young males. Right. You know.
And I started out with, you know, people who are probably watching this video know, you start out with Lortab 5s, right. and then you work your way up to 7.5s, and then you work your way up to 10s, and then by the time, you know, years go by, you're taking 2 10s in the morning and 2 at night, and, you know, it's a never-ending cycle, unfortunately.
Talk to people that get up to 30 or 40 10s a day.
Yeah.
And I think, what is that doing to their liver? What is that doing, you know? But
and I thought about that all the time, you know. It's like we were talking earlier, is a user or an addict, when you start investigating these things, you get on the internet and you start looking about, you know, you educate yourself, you know, people know what they're talking about, they know how to talk to their doctor to get more, and I started investigating on my own, and so I learned so much just from the internet. You know, it's readily available. All that information is out there. So
I'm amazed. The people that have been overtaken by addiction, I mean, very bright, very productive, hardworking, and it sneaks up on you. There's no doubt.
Is it with you? Was it more that the pain was so bad at first, so then you would take more to compensate for the pain? Yeah,
for a large part, it was. Well, like I said, I was a bowler, so, you know, if I was done bowling league at night, and I would bowl 3 or 4 leagues a week, and, you know, I was a pretty hefty bowler, and so at that point, you know, when I injured my shoulder, and, you know, it was always, I would have to feel better to go bowling, and then afterwards, a few hours later, you'd hurt, and you'd need some more,
Right.
the pain. And ultimately, I quit bowling. I haven't bowled for 5-6 years now. And
But pain meds can be a quick fix, right? If you're
Right.
an athlete
That makes
or
sense.
you're working in very physical situations, I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to get through your day and
and
you got
that
to
was
get on to the next
that
step.
was another part of after in 2013 I had lost my job, and it wasn't due to any of the pills that I was taking or anything, but when I lost my job, I had to turn to manual labor for a little while.
Oh, right.
And that made
Yeah.
things worse, and so it was one problem compounded by another, and before I know it, 7 years goes by, and I'm taking 100 to 150 milligrams of Lortab a day, and it's not doing anything anymore.
Right, that's just to
so-
feel normal at that point.
and that's to feel
yeah.
normal. That's not to get not the hallucinogenic. That's not the
Any
word that
kind
I'm
of
looking
euphoria,
for. The
but-
euphoric high.
But it's not even there after a while.
Nope.
You can't take enough,
Nope.
or yeah,
No.
it's a common theme. It's a
Yeah.
common story. And so then, what did your life become when you had to have 10 or 15 a day, or you had to get money for 10 or 15 a day?
Yeah.
What happened next?
Life. It began kind of taking over my personal life and my professional life, and to where I couldn't feel normal. I couldn't function without having enough opiate in my system. And again, it was just to feel normal to get up and go to work. It used to be that in the beginning you would take enough to feel good and go to sleep, but then it became you had to take enough to feel normal and get up and go to work in the morning or whatever. So it became a hugely burdensome in my personal life.
And all consuming for your entire day is thinking about
Yep.
how to get more,
Yep.
how to get money for more.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a lot of anxiety associated
Yep.
with it, is there not?
There is, and when you get a prescription from your doctor, it almost seems like you sit there and you count out what you can, and you always go over your count or whatever, and then at the end of your prescription, you're 5 days too short, and you have to make up an excuse to call your doctor and figure something out, or go to a friend, or a friend of a friend of a friend, and I never got pills from the street. I never went that far. A lot of people do and
Absolutely.
have,
Yeah.
and that's another part of how it just consumes you.
You make a good point. It makes you do things you normally would never do, but for the fear of withdrawals, or
Yep.
but for the fear of running out. So, no. And I talk to people all the time as well that maybe it was a friend, but it could have been a family member. It could have been, like you said, off the street. So you were smart enough to get help before it came to that point.
Yeah.
So that's good. So what was your next step, or when did you realize that it was time?
I realized it was time. Let's see, I went through this for about 7 years, and I realized it was time probably 5 years into it. So I went another 2 years
Right.
still struggling, and at that point in time, this was probably, this was a few years ago, and this was kind of before Suboxone became
Right.
a big thing and really had advanced into the market. And it's been a lifesaver. It's been a lifesaver to me. I mean, I can't tell you how much it's helped. I mean, it's gotten to me where I'm, normal. I feel terrible saying this, but you're a normal functioning adult, and it gets you back into a system where you're not relying so heavily at all on.
Right. And did
on
you
the opiate.
notice, I mean, I use buprenorphine and Suboxone products. I mean, I use those products for several patients, but I mean, in addition to stopping withdrawals and helping control cravings, maybe did you notice mood stabilization or a mind shift back to kind of normalcy?
Yeah.
Did you notice that a lot of the anxiety or something was going
Yeah,
on?
absolutely. It became, like I said, it was a game changer for me, and it was where a lot of the anxiety stopped. I would still, I still have that fear, of withdrawal. I mean, anybody who's been through opiate withdrawal, It is the worst. It is the absolute worst. You can't function at all, and you know, a lot of people describe it as flu-like symptoms, or
sure.
whatever, you know, the fake flu,
Right.
whatever you want to call it. But man, it's agonizing.
You know, I've talked to people that they didn't know, actually. They thought they had the flu the first time.
And I noticed an uptick. I noticed an uptick in the withdrawal symptoms throughout my ordeal and my stage. Early on, if I would run out, not only would I be in pain, but I would notice anxiety. And it was more of a jittery. I couldn't hold still. You get the restless leg syndrome, and you can't sleep, insomnia, but anxiety for the most part.
Right.
But then as you progress, as you take more and more and more over a long term, then it becomes diarrhea and upset stomach and headache. It becomes so much more.
Right.
The longer and the more you take. So.
Yeah, and they even show in the brain where it's associated with the hypothalamus, and so it's associated with a lot of emotion and a lot of fear. So that's not unusual in withdrawals to have so much fear associated with going through withdrawals, or even, you know, when your life seems stable, something feels wrong, or unsettled, or you feel. I mean, did you feel even when you, now that you're stable? I mean, do you still have times where you feel like something's not quite right, or have you figured out how to get through that?
Not nearly as much anymore. I mean, I'm at a point where and a lot of it was mental, I think. It's not only was it physical addiction, but it's a mental addiction as well, and that's a heck of a thing to get over. And I don't go through that anymore. I don't think about it 24 hours a day anymore like I used to. So a lot of the mental side effects, I think, are gone. Thank goodness.
And how long does that take to happen? I know it's a little different for everybody, but I mean, it's a matter of months, if not years.
If not
right?
year,
Yes.
yeah. It was a long term. It was a long term thing, but through the buprenorphine, it was more of a it took away the withdrawal effects. I didn't have any withdrawals whatsoever when I first started taking the strips and Suboxone films. I did have some withdrawal, but immediately, I mean, the whatever the drug does, you're the expert on that. It closes the receptors in your brain that create that high or cause that withdrawal, one or the other. So you don't feel that withdrawal, and so I think that's a lot of that fear is now gone. So
right, and they actually show studies. They have studies out there where the limbic part of your brain, the fight or flight part, starts to finally calm down.
Yeah.
You re-engage the frontal, and you start feeling back in control again, don't you? Where you start thinking about the future.
Yeah, it's like a radio wavelength. You know, when you're using, there's ups and downs all the time. And now it's a nice stable wavelength, which is great.
Do you feel, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but something kind of caught me there. Do you feel this better now? Obviously you feel better now, but before you started this, do you feel like you did before?
Before I started with Dr. Lakin?
No, the addiction.
Right. No, I mean, like I said, it was a lot of mood swings that would go along with it, and but no, I don't feel any worse. No.
So you felt kind of like the same?
Yeah.
But you're right, Phil. A lot of people that come or have addictions, they had a pre-existing anxiety disorder, even bipolar, even depression, but not everybody. And certainly, you have to control the mood disorder if it's there to get people to get off and stay off. But with you,
I was never on anything. I mean, I've never done any drugs other than this in my life. You know, other than alcohol, drink socially and occasionally, but no, I've never. Yeah. I was always the goody two shoe of the family.
Well, this shows you right now that professional as Jared is, that it could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
No, and like so many, I mean, it started with legitimate pain.
Yeah.
And it can get away from you so fast, and so I think healthcare professionals are much more tuned in
Yeah.
to the dangers, but there was a time there where...
And there was a time when the pharmaceutical companies were denying the problem or denying what they knew about these drugs too.
That's exactly right.
You know, we even had, going to the VA, we had it where, that they were prescribing back, you know, just a few years ago, but 250, 300 at a time.
Yeah.
And because it was just thought that that's what was needed. And,
Right.
that was, you know, before I got my knees done, but they had talked about that when I was at
Oh,
VA.
yeah. We were all told in fifth vital sign, and hospitals, you know, made sure that pain was controlled.
Yeah.
And we didn't have use a lot of other modalities. We didn't have the...
And to some effect, the hospitals seem to still be that way as well. That's the first thing they ask you: what's your pain? What's your pain level?
Yeah.
What's your pain level? You need some morphine, whatever. And it's not quite like that, but it's always what's your pain level.
Right.
And I had a hospital stay probably a year ago with a pancreatitis attack, and that was as soon as you go in, what's your pain level? You know.
And I think there's a new awareness now where you're not supposed to be free of all pain like
Right.
they used to. That was the expectation, but certainly, you know, get you to where high functionality.
Right.
And so, but I also, I mean, this is a very powerful story, and I appreciate you coming in and sharing it with people. You certainly don't have to, but I mean, nothing is more powerful than a successful story. You know, somebody that's been there and with a lot of courage, I might add, and some grace, you've conquered it. Now, what's it like on the other side?
It's my life has changed. I don't completely for the better. I don't, you know, I don't think about it. It's a 20 when you're in that hell. It is a hell. And when you're in that, especially when you know you're running out and you have to get more and you have to come up with a reason to get more, or you have to find someone new who has some in their medicine cabinet. You know, it's a 24-hour thought process, and you think about it all the time because you don't want to go through withdrawal. It's not good.
And I often think, you know, I have so many very successful, high-functioning people that are battling addiction. I always think, man, if you could just use that same amount of energy you used every day to, you know, for your job or for something, you know, entrepreneurish, you would be so successful.
So much more successful.
Yeah. And luckily, you've been clean for how many years now?
7 or 8 years now,
That's amazing. Yeah. So you know what it's like on the other side, and now we're exposed to fentanyl, laced, counterfeit pills, pressed pills. There's stuff out there that absolutely kills people.
Well, they're talking about all this fentanyl that's being cut into cocaine and these street drugs that have been out for years. And people that if you don't have a tolerance to this opiate, if you snort a line of cocaine that's been cut with fentanyl, you're dead. You're dead.
I just went to a funeral a couple of Sundays ago, and you know, somebody that got out of inpatient had been late 20s, thought they could handle anything, and got a hold of one of these counterfeit pills. It literally killed them, and they thought they had a tolerance, but after being inpatient and abstinent for a while, they had no tolerance and they died.
And now from what I'm hearing, that these cartels, they're mixing it with carfentanil, which is an elephant tranquilizer.
Yeah, people are coming, they're taking pills. They think it's safer if they use prescription-looking pills. And this was, in one of the cases it was an N30, like one of these oxycodone immediate release N30. No, it wasn't. Well, one patient snorted half of one, and he had to go to the hospital, and he knew he didn't have what he thought.
Much to go.
Yeah. Well, what would you tell somebody? So you've done this, you've been there, you've conquered it. I know it wasn't easy, as you said. But what would you tell somebody that's out there in rural Kansas or out there in some little town that thinks that they're the only one with the problem, or they're embarrassed and they don't know what to do next? What would you tell them?
You're not the only one out there. I guarantee you. A lot of people suffer through this, and your neighbors, your family members suffer through this. It quietly. A lot of my parents knew what I was going through. I had talked, and my spouse knew. We had talked about it, and we knew what was happening. But that didn't make it any easier. They
don't always know how to help you.
Right, they don't know how to help. They don't know what to tell you, and if they're anything, that makes it worse because they're going to help you get what you need.
Right.
And mom and dad cannot tell you no, unfortunately.
them. Yeah.
And it almost becomes an enabler.
Yeah.
So
know
they
what
think
to
they're
do.
helping.
Yeah.
They want to help, but they're not. They're
Was
actually
it
making
was it a
worse.
while before you told your spouse
Yeah.
or your folks?
Yeah, a few years into it, yeah. And so I would say that the treatment options for opioid addiction have come so far in just the last 5 or 6 years that you don't have to suffer through this. I mean, it used to be to get off of this stuff, people had to go through withdrawal. They had to titrate down, and that's the best option. The best thing to do is to titrate down if you can, but a lot of people can't do that.
They can't do that, or they go inpatient and abstain from everything, and they go right back to the same environment with the same friends, the same triggers, and so
the options are out there to safely and comfortably get back to a normal life.
Right. Well, I really would like to thank you. I mean, you've been always a role model for people to follow, and very successful, and so I really appreciate you telling the story, because
Appreciate that.
your story will hopefully inspire others. Like you said, there's so many dangers out there now.
Yeah.
It's nothing to play around with. So now is the time to go get some treatment. Now is the time, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, or medication-assisted treatment like we talked about here. It's worth it on the other side.
It is absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
And, is there a cost to it? Yes, absolutely. But I guarantee you the cost isn't what, it's a lot less than, going to the street and paying $500 or $600 for, a week's worth of
And putting your life at risk as well.
And
Yes.
the dangers of it, yeah.
Well, and family life and parents and everybody's
So much more stable.
wonderful. I appreciate you telling your story.
That's cool.
Thank
That's
you.
really nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jared. Thank you for telling us.
Thanks for having me.
Nope, it takes some courage, and I bet you save some people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I appreciate
Nice
it.
to meet you.
Dr. Lakin is a board-certified family medicine doctor with an emphasis in addiction medicine and over 25 years of experience. For addiction recovery services in the Wichita area, please visit www.centerforchangeks.com or visit samhsa.gov for a national directory of resources and recovery centers in your area. You can also find these links in the podcast description. Thank you for listening to the Lakin Chronicles Road to Recovery podcast. And remember, you've got this.